clearly, Daryl Morey downplaying anything going on between these two. What was your reaction when you heard all this?
I feel like we've kind of been talking about this and have had dialogue about the tension between these two since the end of the postseason, and a lot of that was understandable given the fact of how they finished the year. And it's very true. They are winners. They want to compete for a championship. They probably thought what they had was an opportunity to get there, given the Kevin Durant injury and the way things finished out. However, what I was most curious about in reading the Tim McMahon article that he discussed some of this was the difference in the playing style. And there's been so much talk about how the Houston Rockets play because of James Harden, because of his efficiency in isolation. A part of why they choose to play that way is because he's been doing historic things that we have not seen because of the talents that he has. And Mike D'Antoni also factors into this, given the fact that there has been discussion and issues with his contract, if there will be an extension. So I think with all of that in its totality is why the Houston Rockets have a lot of decisions to make. And the landscape of the NBA has changed with the injuries of Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson. You look at this Houston Rockets team and you say they should continue doing what they're doing. Do you just run it back because they have been this close and now they don't have the team that they have come head-to-head with and fallen? However, I think a lot of decisions need to be made going into the season, because I would have a hard time looking at Mike D'Antoni in the last year of his contract, not getting an extension, discussions between the playing style with two of your leaders, that you assume that everything is just going to be smoothed over if you don't hash that out before the season starts.
All right, so I can tell you what Daryl Morey believes, and this is not speculation, and I can tell you what I believe. What Daryl Morey believes is they should be the favorites. Now, everything we're saying about the Lakers, we should say about Houston.
Favorites in the West?
Favorites to win the title. That they should be the favorites to win the title, given what's happened with Golden State. Daryl Morey believes the Rockets are in a position very few teams in the NBA are, which is they are going to return their exact same starting five. That they are not trading Chris Paul, they're not trading Clint Capella. Now, do I believe that they would have liked to try to trade Chris Paul? I do believe that. I think Chris Paul is a big part of the problem here. More on that in a moment. Do I believe they would have liked to potentially trade Clint Capella if the Warriors were returning everyone? Absolutely. Because if you're obsessed with getting through the Warriors, Clint Capella has shown at this point he's not super useful against those Golden State Warriors. Similarly, Kevin Love was a really good player against a bunch of teams, not very useful against the Golden State Warriors, which is why even after the Cavs won the title in 2016, they were shopping Kevin Love potentially because they knew they were going to have to go through Golden State. So Daryl thinks a lot of this is overblown and thinks that there's regular tension between Chris Paul and James Harden that there would be on any team. Here's what I believe. I believe Chris Paul is a first-ballot Hall of Famer, one of the 6 greatest point guards ever, an outstanding player. And he doesn't get along with people. And he is abrasive. And it is his way or no way. And he is, for the first time in his career since after his rookie season, by year 2, Chris Paul was an MVP candidate. By year 3, he almost won it. He's been the best player on every team he's ever been on until right now. And now, not only is he not the best player, but he is a diminished player. And we have heard so many coaches say, what is the hardest thing in sports? Coaching the all-time great who's no longer great. And I think Chris Paul is struggling with that. And I think it is a guy who has always been abrasive to a degree, who doesn't know how to say the same. You can make the same point a bunch of different ways. He makes it the pointing his finger in his face that way. And now he's doing that, not as the best guy on the team, not as the guy that everything runs through, and that is going to cause some friction. Now, the Rockets are stuck here, though. No one is trading for Chris Paul and giving you anything close to equal value. The only way you would get off that contract is including extra picks, and you're not getting a player to replace him. So that's the position they're in. Now, do I think the Rockets, despite all that, could come back and do what they did last season? Sure, they had the best record after the All-Star break, and then you'll see in the playoffs. But the team they couldn't get through, Golden State, is going to be lessened, which is one of the reasons why I think they might be putting a pause on potential major offseason moves. But this isn't all fake. Like, the Chris Paul, James Harden tension is real. Is it enormous turmoil? I don't know. But it's not made up. That I'm very confident in.
Yeah, a couple of things happened in Houston. Number one is they don't have any confidence in the coach. That's why they didn't give the coach an extension. Even the extension they talked about, part of the extension was they could still fire him, and the money at the end of the contract wasn't going to be guaranteed. They're going to give him like $2 million, even if he signed the extension, even though Well, why are you giving me an extension? To fire me. So they got a huge problem with the coach. I think they have a problem with style. Houston is one of the few teams in the NBA during the regular season, they don't do a bunch of practicing. The owners told us that. Daryl Morey has told us that. And when you get to a playoff series, the practice and the connective tissue that they don't have, because they don't spend a lot of time on the court during the season, the postseason is totally different, where you spend a lot of time on the court, and you don't see D'Antonio from a style standpoint change defensively. So they got a number of issues besides Chris Paul, because this is the same Chris Paul. He was that way in college. He was that way at every stop he's been in the NBA. And Harden's biggest problem is he looked at his critics. He looked at what people were saying. He wasn't going to be in shape. He's perfected that. Isolation ball, pick and pop, he's mastered that. So him being great has affected Chris Paul, because Chris Paul is used to driving the car. And you know what Houston's told him? Hey, get in the passenger seat. And he's like, man, I saw that car crash coming against Golden State. We could have avoided. I was healthy. If we would have run a different offense with me running the point, we could have potentially gotten through that. So these are all real conflicts. But right now, they got to forget all that. The way the West is shaking out, they need to come back as the same team. Capella just got better. Why? Because Golden State's not going to have the Hampton Five to be able to go against. So I think they're one of the favorites in the West as we stand today because of the point you made. They're going to have their whole starting lineup coming back.
Yeah, and you look at it, I mean, the issue comes down to, when we say with style, if on-off numbers of your two best players are better when they're each on the floor by themselves as opposed to being on the floor together, you have a problem. And that's something you need to figure out, because you're going to start a game and you're going to finish a game with those two players on the floor. So that needs to be when your team is at its best.
And Chris Paul, John Wall, they have the two worst contracts in the NBA. Chris Paul's not tradable. You couldn't trade him for a six-pack and a ham sandwich right now. They got $120 million. Yeah, Jason, like that. They got $120 million coming to him over the next 3 years. Yeah. We're wondering, man, can he make it through the playoffs? Last year he did do that, but he's not the player that he once was.
There's one point you made that I disagree with, and that is the faith in the coach. Daryl Morey and Tillman Fertitta went to Mike D'Antoni's house, thought they had shook hands on a deal. Mike D'Antoni says, listen, I'm non-confrontational to a fault. I should have more directly told them, just talk to my agent, Warren Legary. When they brought that same deal to Warren Legary, Legary scuttled it. This was the second time around. This wasn't the $2 million buyout. This was a better contract. I believe
this is after the coach got upset, walked out of the meeting. You know what Tillman Fertitta did? He got on his private plane. So let's put that in there.
Yes.
He got on his private plane, went to West Virginia.
And went to go see him to try to fix it.
You know how I know what people believe in you? What they pay you. What's your contract say?
But see, I think before the season starts, Mike D'Antoni will have a new contract. I don't believe.
But why do you have to fight over it?
Well, okay. Well, that's a separate issue. But
because it undermines his authority with the player. Chris Paul's I'm stuck with for 3 years. So now as a coach, I come to a coach. This is my last year. I can't tell Chris Paul the truth.
This is the way it's got to be.
Yeah, you can't do that.
One of the reasons why they.
And on top of the back, $5 million a year for a coach of Mike D'Antoni's resume and caliber. I mean, that's what a lot.
The offer that he didn't like was $5 million a year, and you get $1 million for every playoff round you advance. So it's $6 million if you pass the first round, $7 million if you pass the second round. Listen, I'm not negotiating the contract. I'm simply telling you I think they will get a contract done with Mike D'Antoni. And for Chris Paul can say, hey, I was great in Game 6. And it was. It was one of the two games in the playoffs he was great in against the Warriors. But Game 5, the swing moment in that fourth quarter when they could have taken control of that series with Durant gone, Chris Paul was bad, Harden wasn't great, and that's when the Rockets, what could have been them and the Raptors in the NBA Finals, that's when it all fell apart. Once again, the Warriors were the stumbling block.
All right, we got to take a break. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.